Alrighty, how is everyone doing today? And welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we dig into great theories, discoveries, concepts that have been suppressed, things that the powers that be don't want you to know about. Today is our 390th Bible Decode. These are things that your priest, pastor, minister, rabbi doesn't want you to know about. And if you ask them, they would tell you, and you got to wonder why. Uh, they instead want you to just uh, trust in the Word, and this is the Word of God. And they give you various incantations for you to drop your critical thinking faculties. But if you are a truther, if you believe in following the truth, as many of you do and have evidence by your great digs uh, that have helped all of us, you would not allow um, yourself to be manipulated by the priests, the pastors, or the scriptures, because these things have been tampered with. And in particular, I have been focusing on the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament. That is, that the true authors of the New Testament were the Romans, the Caesars of the Flavian dynasty and their court intellectuals, in particular Josephus, who Christians generally cite as evidence corroborating the existence of Jesus. But generally, when you cite somebody that you haven't read, it can backfire. And um, if you do read Josephus, I believe he serves as powerful evidence against the existence of Jesus. Because if you read him alongside your Gospels, especially alongside the book of Luke, it will become evident if you kind of read between the lines and know what you're looking for and read kind of with an open mind that the authors of the two books are the same. The books are intended to be read together, and they bounce off each other. They bang off each other. One parodies the other, and then the other parodies it right back. There's a symbolic um, kind of back and forth going on, and there's a lot of mirroring, a lot of uh, parallels and parables between the two. The most egregious example was shown by Joseph Atwill in his book Caesar's Messiah, the Flavian Signature Edition, where he looks at the military campaign of General Titus of the Romans, uh, starting in book 3 of Josephus's War of the Jews. And then he looks at the ministry of Jesus in the book of Luke. And they are the same. The ministry of Jesus was copied from the military campaign of Titus. You could say it would be vice versa, but I think that people really do believe that the uh, war between the Jews and the Romans actually did occur. And there is no corroborating evidence for the existence of Jesus. So, but regardless, the reason why the Romans were writing the New Testament is as a psychological operation against the Jews. And if you are a truther, you by now know what a psyop looks like. The New Testament looks exactly like a psyop. when you kind of know what you're looking for. Um, because the Jews were literally waiting on a Messiah to help come and help them deliver them from the Romans, to kick the Romans out of Judea. And so the Romans proposed a Jewish Messiah who instead was a Prince of Peace and believed in being deferential to the Romans, to um, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to turn the other cheek and to walk the extra mile. And this is exactly what the Romans would write. In addition, Jesus is very critical of the Jewish practices and rituals, overturning the tables of the Jewish money changers outside the temple, or in the outskirts of the temple, and you know, uh, cussing out the Jewish merchants who were selling small animals for the sacrifice at the temple. And then you get into the epistles, uh, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, etc., Ephesians, and so on. Paul is even more deferential and even more critical of the Jews, more deferential to the Romans than Jesus was. And so you can see the motives for the Romans. But then they also have other motives, such as ridicule, mockery, and derision of the Jews, which there is in massive abundance. But you also have to recognize that the Romans, it was a limited hangout. They, they had to make it look like a religion. So they had to put stuff in there that is, righteous and uplifting. So, you can't just say, oh, well, it's not a side. Look at all the beautiful stuff in there. Yeah, well, they put that in there. And they got it from all over the place. They used Roman and Greek stoicism, cynicism. They used the mystery schools. They used astrology, magic, alchemy, um, shamanism, Greek mythology, Chinese and Indian religion and mythology, Japanese, ancient Egyptian mythology and religion, and of course a lot of Judaism coming from the Torah and the prophets. And so it's a big hodgepodge of a lot of religious material, none of it original. Really, the only original aspects in the New Testament are the mockery and the derision and the coded language, the pornography. This stuff is original, but the religious stuff is all borrowed from older sources, as this author, Kersey Graves, says, from the heathens. And if nothing else, the New Testament and Christianity is pagan polytheism par excellence. And that's what we're looking at here today is chapter 25 of Kersey Graves's 16 Crucified Saviors Before Christianity. And this book came out in 1876. And he reviews many of the sources that the Romans used to create the New Testament. The antecedents for the New Testament, books and Bibles that were written hundreds or thousands of years before the New Testament. Chapter 25 is called Absolution and the Confession of Sins of Heathen Origin. And just hold for a second here. Okay, here we go. Some Christian writers have labored to make it appear that this is exclusively a Christian doctrine, absolution, while others have labored as hard to get it out of their Bible or make the people believe that it is not therein taught. We shall show upon scriptural and historical authority that both are wrong. There can be no question as to this rite having existed outside of Christianity, or of its being much older than Christianity. History proves both, nor can it be successfully denied that it is taught in the Christian scriptures, both the confessing of sins and that of forgiving sins. The Apostle James, with respect to the former, is quite explicit. He enjoins emphatically, confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another. James 5:16. The practice of forgiving sins is also enjoined. Forgiving one another is recommended both in Ephesians 4:32 and Colossians 3:13. And whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven, in Matthew 18:18. It is interpreted as conferring the power to forgive sins. And then we remark that the practices both of confessing and forgiving sins are very ancient pagan rites and customs. Speaking of their prevalence in ancient India, the author of the Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins, remarks, the person offering sacrifices made a verbal confession of his sins and received absolution. Auricular, that's with an AU, auricular confession was also practiced among the ancient Mithraics or Persians and the Parsis proper of the same country. Mr. Volney tells us, quote, they observed all the Christian sacraments, even to the laying on of hands in the confirmation. And the Christian Tertullian also tells us that the priests of Mithra promised absolution from sin on confession and baptism, while another author adds that on such occasions Mithra marked his followers, the servants of God, in their foreheads. And that he celebrated the sacrifice of bread, which is the resurrection. In the collection of the Jewish laws called the Mishnah, we are told the Jews confess their sins by placing their hands upon a calf belonging to the priest, and that this was called the confession of calves. Confessing sins was practiced in ancient Mexico also under Numa of Rome, whose priests, we are informed, had to clear their consciences by confessing their sins before they could offer sacrifices. The practice of confessing and forgiving sins, as recommended in the Christian Bible and practiced by some of the Christian sects, has been the source of much practical evil by furnishing a pretext and license, to some extent, for the commission of crime and sin. While sins can be so easily obliterated, they will be committed, perpetrated without much remorse or restraint. In China, the invocation of Omito is sufficient to remit the punishment of the greatest crimes. The same author tells us the ancient initiations of the pagans had tribunals of penance, where the priests, under the name of Rose, heard from the mouth of the sinners themselves the avowal of their sins, of which their souls were to be purified, and from the punishment of which they wished to be exempted. The granting of absolution for sin or misconduct among the early primitive Christians was so common, St. Cyprian informs us, that thousands of reprieves were granted daily, which served as an indirect license to crime. And thus the doctrine of divine forgiveness, as taught by pagans and Christians, has proved to be demoralizing in its effects upon society. All right, chapter 26 is called The Origin of Baptism by Water, Fire, Blood, and the Holy Ghost. Baptism, in some of its various forms, is a very ancient rite and was extensively practiced in several Oriental countries. It was administered in a great variety of forms and with the use of different elements. Water was the most common, but fire and air, wind, spirit, or ghost were also used, and both the living and the dead were made the subjects of its solemn and imposing ceremonies. We will notice each of these modes of baptism separately, appropriating a brief space to each. Okay, I think we're going to try to go through this first one here, and then we'll see. This one is called Baptism by Water. Baptism by water, says Mr. Higgins, is a very old rite being practiced by the followers of Zoroaster, by the Romans, the Egyptians, and other nations, and certainly the Jews. Um, it was also in vogue among the ancient Hindus at a still earlier date. Their mode of administering it was to dip the candidate for immersion 3 times in the watery element, in the same manner as is now practiced by some of the Christian sects, during the performance of which the Hierophant would ejaculate the following prayer and ceremony: O Lord, this man is impure like the mud of this stream, but do thou cleanse and deliver his soul from sin as the water cleanses his body. They believed that water possessed the virtue of purifying both soul and body, the latter from filth and the former from sin. The ancient Mexicans, Persians, Hindus, and Jews were in the habit of baptizing their infants soon after they were born. And the water used for this purpose was called the water of regeneration. Paul speaks of being saved by the washing of regeneration in Titus 3:5. Those who touched these infants before they were baptized were deemed impure. And as this was unavoidable on the part of the mothers, they were required, as in the cases of the mothers of Krishna and Christ, to present themselves on the 8th day after accouchement to the priest in the temple to be purified. The Romans chose the 8th day for girls and the 9th for boys. The child was usually named at the time it was baptized, and in India, the name or God's name or some other mark was engraven or written on the forehead. This custom is several times recognized in the Christian Bible, both in the Old and the New Testament, such as Ezekiel 9:4, Revelation 14:9, Revelation 19:20. John speaks of a mark being made on the forehead in Revelation 13:16, and also of the name of God being written on the forehead in Revelation 3:12. This section is called The Dove Descending at Baptism. At this stage of our inquiry, it may be stated that several of the ancient religious orders had the legend of a dove or pigeon descending at baptism, a counterpart to the evangelical story of the Spirit of God descending in bodily shape like a dove and alighting on the head of Jesus Christ while being baptized by John in Jordan. That's Luke 3:22. It will be observed here that the spirit or soul of God descended not only in the manner, but in bodily shape like a dove. This accords with the tradition anciently prevalent among the Hindus, Mexicans, Greeks, Romans, and Persians or Babylonians, that all souls or spirits possessed or were capable of assuming the form of a dove. Hence, it is reported of Polycarp, Semiramis, Caesar, and others that at death their souls or spirits were seen to leave the body in bodily shape like a dove and ascend to heaven. The divine love, or eros, says Mr. Higgins, was supposed by the Oriental heathen to descend often in the form of a dove to bless the candidate for baptism. These traditions doubtless gave rise to the story of the dove descending at Christ's baptism, that is, God in the shape of a dove, for that is clearly the meaning of the text. We are also informed by our author, just quoted, that a dove stood for and represented among the Orientalists the third person of the Trinity, as it does in the gospel story of Christ, he being the second member of the Christian Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It was considered the regenerator or regenerating spirit, and persons being baptized were said to be born again into the Spirit or the Spirit into them, that is, the dove into or upon them. What a master key is furnished by these Oriental religions for solving the mysteries of the Christian Bible. How much more lucid than divine revelation, so called. We will quote again from Higgins, quote, among all nations from the very earliest period, water has been used as a species of religious sacrament because as it dripped from the clouds, it was observed to have power of reviving drooping nature and creating anew, or regenerating the whole vegetable kingdom in spring. It was hence chosen as an emblem of spiritual regeneration and a medium of baptism. Water was the element by means of which everything was born again through the agency of the eros, dove, or divine love. And hence the ceremony of dripping or plunging, or as it is modernly termed, baptizing, came into vogue for the remission of sins and the regeneration into a new and more holy life. Some streams were supposed to have more efficacy in their respects than others. Hence, nearly all religious nations had their holy rivers, holy water, sacred pools, etc. The Hindus resorted to the holy Ganges, the Egyptians to the holy Nile, the Chaldeans and Persians to their holy Euphrates, the Greeks to their holy lustral water, the Italians to the river Po, and the Jews and the Christians to their holy river Jordan. If Jordan was not called holy, it was undoubtedly considered so. Else why did Elisha order Naaman to wash 7 times in that stream instead of Damascus, which was much nearer and more accessible? And why was Christ baptized in Jordan? And all the land of Judea and they of Jerusalem were baptized in Jordan, confessing their sins, in Matthew 3:6. Why, as several streams were handier to a large portion of the candidates, simply because Jordan was considered to be more holy. And Christians had their sacred pool of Bethesda, as the Hindus had their Sahar. The rite of baptism was at first generally practiced in caves, as were also other religious rites, and as these caves were often difficult of access, and their mouths, doors, or gates narrow and difficult to enter. They fully exemplify Christ's declaration, "Straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leadeth unto life," in Matthew 7:14. And when he declared, "Except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven," John 3:5. He was only seconding the exhortation of the priests to enter these subterranean vaults and be baptized after the Oriental and Jewish custom. Thus originated baptism by water in the form of dipping or immersion. Okay, we're going to stop right there. The next section here is called baptism by sprinkling, and so we'll get into that tomorrow. Meanwhile, thanks for tuning in today. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and contribute. And come back tomorrow for Bible Decode number 391 on this channel, the Wild Tangent channel. And thanks for tuning in today. Have a wonderful day.